Hi Josh.
Hi, Hannah.
So first of all, take me through what are drag and tag along rights?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, they're terms that are thrown about quite a lot in these transactions, but I think best thought of as sort of who are they intended to protect. So the drag along protects the majority and the tag along protects the minority. And the way they do that is that the drag along allows the majority, if they wish to sell 100% of a company, to compel the minority to take part in that deal. Conversely, the tag-along benefits the minority in that if there's a sale for a majority stake, that allows the minority to insist that their shares are effectively swept up as part of that deal. They don't get left stranded with a new majority shareholder who they hadn't reckoned on being in business with.
Thanks Josh. What are the key negotiating points for founders then?
So for drag, there's a slightly competing interests between investors and founders. Investors will want to be able to force an exit at any time that there's a deal on the table that represents a good return for their underlying investors. Often that might be after a holding period for sort of EIS and SEIS investors, but sort of a lot of investors just want to be able to push that deal through when there's an offer. Founders might have a slightly longer term view. They're not driven by an investment horizon in the same way a fund might be. So they will sometimes want to be able to put a brake on that drag. So you typically see a founder will push for having a specific consent to a drag along being exercised, which would quite often meet some resistance from an incoming investor. Like the other key negotiating point you see is around a threshold, and that's sometimes a slightly easier path to the same protection for a founder, in that your drag along might not simply be sort of 50% plus one, it might be set at 60% or 75%, which kind of the numerical assessment of that might mean that the founder has to be on side as part of that deal, even if they're not specifically consenting to it. On the other side, founders and in fact all minorities, if they're looking at potentially being dragged into a deal, they're going to have very limited say over the terms of that deal. So the conversations you typically see around drag along are what warranties are being given by those people. The position you generally arrive at on that is that a dragged shareholder doesn't give any warranties other than their title and capacity to sell the shares that they're the holder of. Contentious is the debate around what form of consideration dragged shareholders can be compelled to take, or indeed whether they get any say in it. So again, investors and other institutional shareholders don't want to be in a position where they could find themselves forced to accept equity in an unknown entity in the future. So they typically seek a position where, as a dragged shareholder, if they're in that scenario, they can insist on receiving cash. Conversely, majority shareholders, when negotiating the same provision, will often want to be able to make that same election themselves and cash out any minorities. Again, quite often an acquirer or even the majority shareholders will probably look to use a transaction as an opportunity to tidy up the cap table and get rid of sort of, especially if you've got a long tail of individual shareholders, just to reduce the numbers down a little bit to a smaller group of core shareholders.
Okay, thank you.